I express myself in a very feminine way. I use hand gestures a lot. I speak a certain way. I walk a certain way, and maybe my voice is a little too shrill. And so I think that was like those were all of these were like the objects where like that kind of attracted ridicule and that attracted abuse or bullying in my life. And it was not just in like in playground. It was also like present in my school. It was also present in my madrasa. My queer awakening was on a lighter note. Like I was someone, we had this desktop in our home and everybody used that desktop. But somebody had put a song in there. It was My Dil Goes Hum. My Dil Goes Hum. It was a Bollywood song. It had Preeti Zinta and Saif Ali Khan in it. And so my queer awakening was Saif Ali Khan. I saw that man and I was like, oh my God, like, like I was like, I think I broke into cold sweats afterwards because I like realized that, oh, like, this is something different because looking at this man, it's like, it's doing something to me, right? If like what Pretty Zanta would do to a straight person was Saif Ali Khan was doing that to me, doing that for me.
Hello and welcome to Life's Tapestry, a podcast where we talk about the experiences that shape us, ordinary or extraordinary. I'm your host, Mohammad Haris, and I'm joined by my co host, Rija Alam. Hello, Rija.
Hello, Haris.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm actually really excited about today's guest.
Yes, so am I. Before we start talking to our guest, I think we should introduce the podcast and let our audience know what can they expect and what are you trying to achieve with this podcast.
Yeah, so Life's Tapestry is all about finding the uniqueness in people and finding these stories that everyone has, but they're not running around talking about them. And it's all about giving them that safe space to open up about it and talk about it on this platform.
Exactly. So talking about today's episode, as Reja mentioned, this podcast deals with personal stories against backdrop of universally lived themes. And since it's Pride Month, so we are starting out with a queer story. Our first guest is someone who is a close friend of ours, and they will share their experiences as a queer kid growing up in rural Pakistan. So let's talk to them. Hello, Talha.
Hi Haris and hi Rija. How are you both?
We're
I'm
good. How are
good. How are
you?
you?
I'm also good. So I think you guys have already done like introduced the theme for today. So like I think I'll just dive into the conversation. But before I do that, I'll just kind of tell you that I really like I'm a very fast talker. So if at any point during the conversation you sense that I'm speaking very fastly or like my tongue is running at 180 kilometers per hour, feel free to cut me off and tell me to feel free to tell me that I should maybe hold my horses. So yeah, so I
So
think that we sure, sure.
yeah, I guess we can start. But before that, I'll just talk about uh, this podcast. When I think we thought of this idea about an year ago. I think more than an year ago, we thought of this idea,
For
and
sure.
yeah, and we made a list of people we thought, some like interesting
Mhm.
people we can invite and they can talk about things,
Good.
and what kind of things we want to talk about. Your
And
name
it's
was in the
very,
list. Yeah, your
yeah,
name was in the list
100%.
from the
You're
very start. Yeah. So
you're
what?
Oh my
way
God.
The
so
thing was, we were just planning and planning, but we weren't going for it, not executing it. Every
Mhm.
time I guess we just wanted to be too perfect or something. Oh, we'll have this, we'll videos and whatnot. But at one
Mhm.
point, like last week, it just occurred to me, it doesn't matter like the technical quality of it doesn't matter. I mean,
Sure.
content's quality obviously matters,
Doesn't matter.
and it just
It's about the
occurs to me at that point.
conversation.
I also met you in
Mhm.
Peshawar, I guess a day or two before that, and we were traveling from Peshawar to Swabi, and we were talking, and I just it occurred to me, if we invite him, he can talk about all those things we were talking about in a podcast. We can record it. It will be a great episode.
Yep.
And the other thing is uh, that you and we know each other
Mm-hmm.
since long. Like I guess
So we go way
the
back in
time we
time. Yep.
became friends, and till we were in college, from school to college, it's I guess we were what, like 16 to 17, 18 years, 19 years old maximum. So
Yeah.
I guess that's also a very important part of life, in the sense that you are kind of discovering
Mm-hmm.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you're looking for your place in the world, and just kind of you're developing your intellect. You see what's wrong, what's right, what's good, what's bad, and you also want to know where you belong in this world. So I guess mostly we'll be talking about topics around this,
Mm-hmm.
and that particular time period. But I guess I mean, this is the kind of question we thought we'll be asking everyone who comes on this podcast. And the question is that, if you can share a little about your
Mm-hmm.
childhood,
Yeah.
like what kind of environment you grew in, uh, about your parents, and, the people around you. So, yeah, if
Mm.
you can
Yeah,
share a bit.
so yeah, because we were discussing the theme and we were discussing the things you wanted to talk about, and a lot of these things just stem a lot from where you grew up and like the kind of people that surrounded you, the kind of support you
Yeah.
had, and like just and like just talking about like Pakistan in general, it's not very welcoming to anyone who's out of the box. So yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, we just wanted to have you on board and have a very raw conversation about all of this stuff. So yeah, the floor is on. The floor is yours, Talha.
Yeah,
Okay, sure.
and
Thank you so
just
much.
to make sure, I mean, particularly about your childhood, like we'll talk about, the rest of the things as we move
Sure.
forward in this podcast. Yeah.
Sure. No, I have a lot of things to say on a particular theme that you guys have chosen for today. So like you see, I think like when we talk about like childhood like that I've had, and I think that many children would will have had in Sawabi, in rural Sawabi. Well, Sawabi is a town; it's a rural town. It's not like a city. So anyway, so I think like it's really you see that like I don't know, like I think our parents, parents of children who are like who belong to like the middle class bracket or lower middle class bracket, they're not really present. I think like they're like too occupied, dealing with jobs and making ensuring that the food is on the table and stuff like that. I think they're too occupied. So like my primary caregivers had a lot on their plate. So I mean, it's not that I'm blaming them that they weren't really present. It's just that they had like, if I had been a parent of 4 kids and earning what my father earned, and I don't think my mind will be there that what my child is up to, and whether how they feel about this thing that their teacher told them or whatnot. I don't think that there is time, there's room for that. So it's just that I think, and that's not, it's not like just true for me, it's true for a lot of kids who grew up in like similar like social bracket as I did. So I think like I had a lot of freedom as a child, and like I was introverted, but I was also, sorry, very like a very sporty kid, like as a child. Like Haris would see that I'm not really into sports at all, as he knows me now. I'm not into sports right now, but as a kid I was. So I used to play and I used to do stuff, and so like I had a lot of freedom, and I think like freedom like brings a lot of brings a lot of capacity for growth. But it's like it also like children behaves in certain, like if children are not like supervised by adults now, they have like I think this penchants to be like act like tyrants, act like really like bullies. So I think that I had to deal with like a fair amount of bullies in my life because I was different in an environment where different was like a death sentence. So like everything was an opportunity, like everything, the way I like my entirety, the entirety of my existence, but how I carried myself, how I spoke, how I sat, how I did, how I played, anything, like anything that you can do with your senses and your organs or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm like being crude here, but like whatever I would do would
Mhm.
be like a thing that people would pass judgment on, that would be ridiculed, I think. And so I think that is something that has like stood out for me as a child, because I was I express myself in a very feminine way. I use hand gestures a lot. I speak a certain way, I walk a certain way, and maybe my voice is a little too shrill. And so I think that was like those were all of these were like the objects where like that kind of attracted ridicule and that attracted abuse or bullying in my life. And it was not just in like in playground, it was also like present in my school, it was also present in my madrasa. And I think that is like that like really kind of like and it's just not like the queer kids that I've spoken to who have grown in similar environment as I have, they have went through similar things. So I think that's one thing that stands out for me, and how I had to deal with that, and how I had kind of make sense of that. And so because every child wants to like fit into a mold, I think belongingness is a very strong motivator in life, even as an adult, but particularly when you are a child. So it's like a most important compulsion that people have, I think. And so I wanted to belong, but it was difficult to belong because I couldn't be a part of like because I couldn't do what other let's say cisgendered hetero kids could do. So I think that is what stands out to me as a child, that I had to deal with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a hundred
So
percent. I mean, like the way you spoke about your preteens, like in general, everyone's preteens is just about finding themselves, and
of
just
course.
realizing that you're not the way everyone else is. Like slowly coming to that realization, it can change a lot about yourself, the way you see yourself, your self identity. So yeah, can you speak a bit about that?
We all make yeah, I think we all make peace with who we are at some point. We like bargain, and we kind of we I think as we grow we stop caring about what like we do care, but I think we don't care sufficiently because we start to like become who we want to be. And I also think like this thing that I believe in, that you get refined through ordeals. You get refined through the things that you go in life. And I think that is also true in my sense, that I went through some stuff, and kind of it gave me like a Teflon coating. It gave me like a very thick skin. So like now that like now I can like I can stand up for myself, like but it's just that it gave me a very thick skin. So in my preteens I was like pretty okay with being called names, and but I also like kind of I think slowly and gradually I used to read a lot, right? So I would read a lot, and somewhere I read that you have to like stand up to your bullies, because when you stand up to them, like they lose the little self-respect they have for themselves, and even they'll like end up hurting you, but they'll lose that very tiny smidgen of self-respect that they have for themselves. And I read that somewhere, and
Yeah.
I said that I would start standing up for myself. And I did that. And so later on, like as I think grew, and I kind of came into my preteens and early adulthood, you would say like the years from 12 like 13 14 to 16 16 17 around, I think I was like pretty kind of, I was someone who could stand their ground. So and that's like how I think life happened to me, and how I think I dealt with it. So I think the difficult part is the lack of support that I think queer kids like, they don't get support from anywhere. Like it's just like the support doesn't come from anywhere, because everyone like in my vicinity, because I had like, I would like to think that I had like my schooling was happened in a school that was pretty liberal. Like I was like in if you know that I mean, I wouldn't want to like take the name, but like the school was like located in an area that was pretty liberal, and the teachers was also, they all came from different parts of the country. They weren't like they didn't come from Sawabi locally. So all of them were like well educated folks, and who you would think that they had been exposed to different things in their life, and maybe they had a perspective that that left room for people who were different or who acted different. But no, all of them were like just like were like most of them were just, I mean, I'm sorry to say, but like most of them were just bullies. Like they would always like kind of criticize or judge how I walk, and they would kind of parade me around in the class that
Yeah.
this is how you should walk, or this is how you shouldn't walk. And I think that is really hurtful. Like you would think that your adults will
Hmm.
somehow have a like a broader, like they'll leave room for some that the people can come in different shades. But no, like that's something that's I think that just stings out still.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that you had a lot of like scrutiny on yourself. You had a big like magnifying glass on yourself growing up, because people could see that you were different and they wanted to like
Mhm.
point it out and make sure you knew.
Yeah, that's true. And also, like, I think, like you will have like Arija, like you yourself might have gone through, like, I'm not sure, like, I hope you have not, but if you have gone, like, like through bullying or something, like, it's just in your face. It's too brutish, it's too like nasty, it's just like it's too much, it's in your face, and there's no way to avoid it. And it kind of like, it does like a few things to you, like, it hurts you, and it kind of changes your, I think, like, mind a little. It just kind of does a number on you. But I mean,
Mm.
later on, when you dissect it and when you sit with yourself and you say, those are the things that people said to me, and those are obviously not true. But I think as children, as like when you're young, I think it can have like a harming effect. So yeah. So
Yeah, that
back
makes
to the
sense.
Yeah, of course. So I think like you guys are talking about like preteens, and I think by preteens or by early adulthood, I had figured out who I was. I think like like most of the folks in community, but they say that we had like this word that we said we had a queer awakening, right? So like my queer awakening was on a lighter note. Like I was someone we had this desktop in our home, and everybody used that desktop, but somebody had put a song in there. It was My Dil Goes Hum. My Dil Goes Hum. It was a Bollywood song. It had Preeti Zinta and Saif Ali Khan in it, and so my queer awakening was Saif Ali Khan. I saw that man and I was like, oh my God, like, like I was like, I think I broke into cold sweats afterwards because I like realized that, oh, like, this is something different because looking at this man, it's like, it's doing something to me, right? And so I think that's like the queer awakening that I had. Like when I watched that song, I was young, I was, I think, like 9, 10, and I realized that there is something different, the way I feel about this like thing, or, it's doing something to me that like it would do to like if like what Pretty Zanta would do to a straight person was Saif Ali Khan was doing that to me, doing that for me, and that was like my queer awakening. And so like most folk in like community have this queer awakening, and that was mine. Somebody would just kind of go and would buy want to like a friend of mine. I think he was telling me that he was going with his father to buy underwears, and he like all these like boxes that they keep it underwears, and they have like a snapshot of a man wearing those boxers or underwears,
Hmm.
so he said, I saw that and I knew that, I am in, like, this is doing something to me. And that was my queer awakening. And a friend of mine was saying, so I think like that is how I realized that, there was something different, or like my romantic centers were located somewhere else. So yeah. So I think most people who are queer, like I think like one thing that I would really want to be like honest and blunt about is that most queer folks in like who come from small towns, they don't accept that they're queer. Like they like it's difficult. It's like I think it's like as I told you, it's like a death sentence. Like if my like if people I know who are queer, if the family were to find out, and the things wouldn't end up like really like there would be problems in their life, and like problem saying that there would be problems in their life is an understatement to how things will work out for them. So I think that most folks that I've known here in my locality, or even like in my college, I and Haris were in the same college, but I met like a few queer folks, queer guys there, made friends with them. But later on, like now that we are like, I think it's been 6 or 7 years since college, and now that I speak to them, they're fully like kind of they fully refuse to like they completely refuse to accept the fact that they are queer. Like even though that they have told me many times that they are the way they are, but now that they are adults,
Hmm.
they feel like there's so much pressure and there's so much stigma and there's like so much like scandal attached to this that it's like really, I think, something that they can do. So I think like I have my joy and they have their own joy, both joys are fleeting, as they say. But it's just that I think that it's just like I think that it also like when you refuse to accept a part of yourself, like it comes with a lot of
Hmm.
like self-hatred and like the insecurity, like you want to have the joys of what like a queer life can bring, but you do not are not willing to pay
Yeah.
the price because the price is
I
just too
think it's
much.
also, you're right, because I think the whole thing is all about, like, they've grown up with a certain type of feeling attached to a certain type of topic, that when they think about queer, they just think about, okay, say that's something I don't want to associate myself with. They've just internalized all that hatred, and with
Yeah.
Yes,
that
but
they're foregoing a lot of, yeah. Haris, you were
uh,
speaking.
yeah, I was saying that there must be a lot of conflict uh, going on in their mind, because I feel a certain way, but I hate that feeling.
Hmm.
and the way it's going to hurt their their, let's say, their self-esteem, what they think of themselves. And
Or
if
their
you can
reputation even,
talk
matlab,
about this a little more,
Sure.
there are so many things, that, if you feel a certain way and you're being told that, it's a stigma, it's a bad thing,
Mhm.
so you can also feel guilty for being the way you are. So yeah, if you can talk a little about this as well.
So you see, like I think, like most folks that I've spoken to, they have like they know it in their bones that they are this way. Acceptance, like some outrightly like refuse to accept, some have like accepted that this is the thing. And so like most that I've spoken to, like my like friends from the KP region particularly, they refuse to flat out refuse to accept that they are this way, even though like our previous conversation when I point out to them that they clearly told me then, and they said, oh no, we were like
Hmm.
in bad mood, or we were depressed, or it was something like we were not like we were in a dark place or whatever.
Yeah, it was
And
a
that's
phase or something. Yeah.
I should have picked something, and then like there's another group of friends who will like they'll kind of accept that who they are, but it's just that they like they are not willing to pay the price, and the price isn't just low self-esteem. The price isn't just stigma. The price is sometimes it can be bodily harm. Sometimes like I'm sorry to like I think like it's just kind of I think I can be like blunt, and I can like it's a crude thing to
No,
say,
no,
but
it's
like
important to speak about. It's important to speak about 100%.
so it's just that it is even true that you've because I've heard stories now, like there was this friend from Sahiwal, and somehow the family found out, and they were like physically abused, mentally abused, and I think they were like sent to like a therapist or somewhere who did like a lot of bad things to them. And they were like the family was like way liberal than my family is, like anybody
Hmm.
that I know, like in my close circle, the families are pretty conservative, and the guy's family was pretty liberal, but still like he went through a lot of stuff. And so if like someone I'm telling you, like some of my friends who live in KP, if they were to some if their families was if they were to accept this, if they were to tell their family they were to going to have a formal coming out, I think that would be an like I think it would alter their life. Their life again is an understatement. They would be in. They would put their self in harm's way, in actual bodily harm. So I think that
Yeah.
that is what so I think it's also like the marginalization of queer folks. It's not just that the queer folks have to like deal with low self-esteem or all of that bullying or all of that. It's also that they're marginalized in the truest sense of word. They are punished and marginalized. And so uh, like people know that they are gay. Like they have like many people they know that they are queer or gay or bi or lesbians or like that they are trans, because I think maybe we in the your audience are of course intelligent. They know that gender identity is something different, and sexual orientation is different, but
Of
both of them
course.
can come with a huge stigma, right? So like again I said that people kind of accept this, and but they stop at the next thing, which is like choose an alternate life, you know uh, so they kind of try to accept them, fit themselves in the mold, and they think that maybe this life will bring them joy, but then they kind of like I think fit into the norm, like they fit the social, like they accept social norms. But it's just that there's this old man that I know, that I was speaking to this once this while he was of course square, and he had been forced into marriage. He was an old man into his 70s, and he said that
Oh,
he had lived a very like he told me that he lived an almost life. It was like he was almost out, almost in. It was a half-assed life. Like if he was think like he said that if he could choose, he said that he had all the opportunities and all the luxuries in life, but if he could choose, he would have chosen not to have chosen not to have come into this life, because he could not, like he had accepted themselves selves, but the family had forced them into a straight marriage. And the person that they married, he said that I'm also very like I also feel like very guilty, because I like if it hadn't been for me, this person who I was married to would have lived a very wonderful life, will have lived a very kind of a life that that had the pleasures that maybe they needed. So he said that my life got ruined, but also the other person got life ruined. And so I think
yeah.
it's a
I
conversation
can
that
I
needs
can
to
understand, like the story that you just told is actually very
be.
moving. Like they're like 70s, right? The person is in their
Yeah,
70s, and they've lived like a full life, and yet they haven't lived their life, because they can still keep imagining the way it could have been. And
Of course.
obviously that's something that it was not possible for them, so they just wish that it was not there at all, and
Of course.
I feel like that at the similar I've gone through a similar story. I don't know if you also saw it, but in the middle of this whole like situation, I saw that there was this person who had gone through who publicized the story of them going through conversion camp, and
Mm.
then their entire like they uploaded these stories and they were like, hey, so this and this happened to me. And I just want everyone out there to know that this is exactly what happens in these conversion camps. And then these
Yeah.
videos were taken down and they were forced to upload these like straight faced I am
Apology.
okay videos. Did you
Of
see
course.
those?
I know that person. Like they're an acquaintance of
Oh,
mine. Yeah.
Oh,
So like and then that person like comes like from a, like a very like they are like I think he's like a well off comes from a very well off family. The family is also very liberal,
mm,
and you see like this is happening in the families or like in the circles, in the elitist circles, where you will think that oh, like they'll be more receptive to something like this because they've seen the world. And like I'm sorry, I'm like,
yeah,
constantly saying they've seen the world, but it's like a psychological thing that when you're exposed to like different cultures and different things, you're like more receptive to change or all of that. So but that is happening there. And so like now imagine what will be happening in, let's say, in a small town in KP, right? So it's like it and
yeah.
then like you really get the picture how horrible it can be. So I mean, and on that point, I would really like, I think maybe like we venture further in this conversation, I would really want to like talk about how this like this cultural war that's like upon us now, like the right wingers in Pakistan, or like there's an entire kind of brigade of these folks who are kind of demonizing and kind of you know uh, saying bad things, or about queer and trans folks. And like there's an entire this ecosystem or ecosphere of these men and women who are trying to demonize trans folks. And I would like really want to like talk about that cultural war, like about like how we are being like demonized and stuff, and how that's harming the community, and how that's like again a stupid thing to do, but like really I think that's an also important conversation to have. But I'll just kind of let you guys jump in and ask if like there's something else you'd want to ask.
No, if you want to talk about this, yes, you can talk about this. If you have something to ask, we can ask you after.
Okay, sure. So I think I just like really wanted to, like I think one of the thing that again I'm just kind of venture like going towards the gender kind of like the gender topic here. Like when I said the gender identity of a person and the sexual orientation can be totally different things. And so like where gender can, like I just would like want to like take a moment to talk about how like we are having these gender rules in this world, and why like this activism that we are having in Pakistan currently, that says that the gender rules came from the West and all of that, is I think is it. And a lot of activists that I've seen in Karachi, as you both have been like have studied in Karachi and have like lived for like I think Rija is already from Karachi, but Haris has also lived I think
yes,
close to 5 years in Karachi now. So I think there is
Yeah.
like this actual like a few, not a few, like a lot of activists in Karachi who are trying to like win over the conservatives in Pakistan uh, by saying things that I think are like hurting the community than helping the community. So you see, like we got the gender roles actually because historically speaking, when after like the Neolithic revolution and Paleolithic revolution, when the agriculture came and humans started having this sedentary life, women were expected to have like close on average. I think I was studying 7.1 children. And so they had to like then attend and take care of the elderly, and go through the gestation period, and then bring about the child, and take care of that child. And that translated into like close to like if you like 1 year for per child, the gestation period, and 1 year at least 1 to 2 years to take care of
mm,
that child. So that translates into 20 year of your life where you cannot do anything but to like take care of children, right? And also like there's a pressure to produce more children because close to like 50% of the children before their puberty would die. I'm talking about like the life like when after the Neolithic and Paleolithic revolution. And so I think that is where like gender roles came from, because men were supposed to go out and kill the buffalo and bring the food, and and the women were supposed to tend and take care of the children or whatever. And so that kind of like changed how before that everybody was a hunter gatherer, but after that was like we had like this sedentary life. We kind of tried the gender became like not be, it didn't become a thing, but like supposedly, because since there were no machines, and since like the body strength was a thing that kind of like if since like men have I think 56% more upper body strength, like so they like if they were to move a boulder, and if they were to they were supposed to protect the tribe, and they were supposed to bring the food to the table. And so all of that like give the men more like kind of let's say they like that like pedestalized men, or that kind of gave them like I think the needs of the tribe. And while women were supposed to like take care of the elderly or whatever, right? And so I think that is where like we say that the gender roles were born like then and there. And so slowly and gradually the because then and there the gender roles were maybe they had like some significant, but after like the post industrial revolution we don't need gender roles anymore, what men could do with we don't need men for like their strength or anything. We have machines for stuff. And so I think like the gender roles are there because they are the remnants of the things that humans as species have gone through. And so I think like now as like anthropologists and psychologists and all these sociologists are saying that gender is a social construct, and it is a social construct in the way that history somehow needed it at some point, but we no longer need it. But I think there is like this wave of activists in Pakistan who are saying that gender roles are we don't need gender roles anymore. Like we don't have to put labels on anything. And the gender roles were came to Pakistan as a result of colonization. And so if and so we were always a part of subcontinental culture. We like always the hijras, I think there's a few activists in Karachi who were saying that hijras was always like the trans folks were, and they use the word hijra, were always part of subcontinental culture, and they were used to like kind of they had the role of shamans, or they used to kind of sing hymns, or like they used to kind of they had like this let's say close to like they could somehow communicate with God and all of that. Like they had a spiritual role in the culture. So I'm just like kind
Okay,
of
okay.
trying to make a case for how that is like the bad kind of like activism. So like the Mehrab or the Gender Interactive Alliance in Karachi. So what they're doing really is kind of trying to justify the the existence of Hijra community or the trans community, because we were like somehow the Hijras like acted in the darbars of the Nawabs, and they kind of they had like a spiritual role. And so like the entire animus for queer existence in Pakistan should be that since we have existed historically, and so like we should be like we have a history, and we should be allowed to like we should be like allowed to have a self perceived identity, and we should have a right to self perceived identity. And that's like the argument they are going by. Okay? And I think that's like the wrong way to do this. Like I mean, like if I exist and you exist, and because we know that gender dysphoria is real, right? Gender dysphoria is when there is like incongruence between the sex you were assigned at birth, and the gender you were assigned at the birth, and how you feel about yourself. And then when that incongruence causes you distress, when that incongruence causes you depression, or anything like mental health issues, then the doctor's diagnosis at that this is gender dysphoria and it needs to be treated. And so I think what they are doing wrong here is that they are trying to create an entire argument based on like it's like they're doing respectability politics. They're like appealing to this sense that like hijras were the cast outs from the people who were ostracized, and somehow were and then they took on this spiritual role, and they had like they worked in the darbars or somewhere. And so that is why we like our this right to self-perceived identity should be granted in this day and world, because we already have like a historical role that we have played throughout these times. And I think like that's so what I'm saying really is that that shouldn't be how we should go about this. Like what how we should go about this is gender dysphoria. It's been diagnosed by this is something that can be diagnosed. And since this is a thing that and so by the very token that I don't feel I feel dysphoric, I should be allowed to have a self-perceived identity, rather than going rather than like doing this respectability politics. Because you see, like I have met this trans person in KP. I'm not going to take her name. She's like a famous dancer of sorts, and she was telling me that she would want to be a lawyer. She's like, she would really like. I don't know where she get this idea from, but she had seen, I think, a movie or something, and she really wanted to become a lawyer. And so I was talking to her, and then I later on was watching this podcast by one of these activists, and they were saying, ki, we are like a spiritual kind of leaders that have existed historically, and we should be like, and that is like the very by that very token, our like since we have this history, so no one can erase that history, and so by that token, we should be allowed to like have a right to self-perceived identity. And so like maybe that's the wrong way, because maybe nobody wants to like go out and uh, uh, you know uh, greet, or like no one wants to like, I mean, maybe there's a hijra person who's not spiritual like at all, and who is not like into that kind of uh, things that hijra persons would normally do traditionally, and they want to become a lawyer, as my friend wanted to be, and so they're not really interested in that history. Like it's like saying that my ancestor used to do this thing, and even though I'm no longer, I don't want to do that thing, but still, like, you should grant my life to life, because like, even like, I don't think like your right to life should be contingent upon the fact that you have existed historically. I exist, or any other trans person exist, and insofar as we are not harming anybody, our right to life should be protected and preserved. And like, the harm shouldn't be like, oh, I'm hurting somebody's feeling, or oh, I'm hurting somebody's sentiments. The harm should be actually inspectable, examinable harm. And insofar I'm not like breaking any laws, I think my life to right should be preserved and protected. And that's the point we should start from. And that's how we should lead this, this battle, or whatever it is, for queer rights in Pakistan, for self-perceived
Um,
identity rights.
yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you, people like Mehrab and the kind of uh,
Yeah. There's Hina,
the
there's Mehra, there's a lot of
historical facts you
Divya
talked
Rana. Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So do you think they're doing it because it's Pakistan and they're like just give it some
Mhm.
spiritual touch to just get some
Yeah.
acceptability
Yeah.
from the government
Yeah.
and from the society? Is it because of that only, or is it just
No,
something they actually believe in? Like they do believe
might
that we
actually,
are some spiritual people.
yeah. So I think they might actually believe in that, or they don't believe in that. That's, I mean, if you're calling yourself activist, and if you're calling yourself a torchbearer of this movement in Pakistan, right? And then you should be able to like, I just like, it's just a criticism, right? Like the criticism that I heard from many people that I've spoken to, and criticism that I share with them, that this is not the right way to go about it. Like, this, like, your argument shouldn't be solely, your argument should stem from the fact that I am human and I deserve to be protected. And
Hmm.
my right to life, it deserves to be protected, regardless of how my ancestor lived, regardless of where they lived. Because one of the detractors, that I'm telling you, that there are a lot of like somehow these we have, like, as I said, this culture war is upon us now. So there's a lot of right wingers who, and one of them actually said this thing, that we also have traditionally, we also have dowry in our culture, we also have had karo kari in our culture. And so why should, and those are bad things, and we should like kind of remove them from our cultures, and we've tried to remove them. And so like these hijra peoples are also like just a bad remnant of our past, and we should also remove it. And so he said that not all things that have existed in our culture have been good things. So and that, and when you like
Yeah, makes
when
sense.
you when you go about it this way, I think like your detractors will have like a lot of they'll come up with this. Okay, we've also had karo kari. We no longer have karo kari in most of parts of Pakistan. So it's not like we should keep all the bad things from our past.
Hmm.
And
I think I agree with
and
you because if I just think about it now, like if you base your entire argument on something
Hmm.
that okay, because something has existed in history, you open a Pandora box. You just open basically like okay, हाँ पर ये भी like this should also be a thing and this should be also be a thing, and people can pull from whatever they get, and this is just like it's going to give them way too much to talk about. So just basing on the idea that okay, I too am human and I too reserve rights, and there is no way that you can make me feel any less than you are just because of the way I feel about myself, or just because of the way I feel about my body, and just because of the gender, maybe I was fine at, but then it's not like there's some dissonance in my head that tells me that this is just, So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, sure. And you see, like the problem with this argument is that, and how they like kind of try to like gain, like as Haris said, that maybe it's Pakistan and they're trying to like win over the government or the right wingers by kind of trying to justify their existence, that they are like the spiritual folks who have like a existence in history, and because like they were like they had like actual shaman like people who could predict things, and who could in the harvest season they would go and sing hymns in the fields, and make prayers for good harvest and all of that. Like they have had this role. And and and, and so the activists, I think they like this kind of this group of activists, in mostly these are the activists in Karachi. These talking points were not shared by many people outside of Karachi. So what they, I think, and they like the other argument that they have is that this is that when the Britishers came, or when the colonizers came, they they brought upon us this binary of gender, and that the binary of gender did not exist before the Britishers came here. And so they and so it's due to them that we are having these issues in our government and our society right now, in Pakistan. Okay, it's just we have to decolonize ourselves from those binaries. Sorry.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Uh,
I do agree,
with
and I remember like when
Mhm.
Mehrab came to talk about the whole situation, like the current what's going on currently for the trans community in Pakistan. She spoke a lot about like how they've been trying to introduce the X gender on the CNICs so that we can just basically legalize everything and makes everything that. But there's been so much discussion on how this new system of like the gender being X can just also be used for people who want to go into like same sex marriages, and that's something that pulls their argument down. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and so like I mean, of course, the critics are saying that if someone changes their like the law says that if you change your identity to X, you cannot legally marry. And so there hasn't been like there hasn't been a total of 10 instances. Like I think there was one instance where a person who had marked X on their identity, another person who also had X on their identity, they got married, and that marriage was later on annulled. So that was just one incident that happened, I think, somewhere in Punjab. And the right wingers like went amok with this argument that, oh, if you were to change this identity to X, then suddenly everybody would start like like there would be a rampant same-sex marriages in Pakistan. And that's not just true. Like there haven't been, even I'm telling you, like 10 instances, 5 instances. This was just one instance where it happened and the marriage was later on annulled. But then it's like this is what the cultures war do. They like take away the focus where it should be and take the focus to another point, like where it shouldn't be, like and one of the talking point, as I said, na, like there's this another person who I'm saying that there's an entire ecosystem. Like I don't want to name names, but they're like the Maria B sisters, the two of them. They're out there for like trans people's blood. There is this the youth club kind of community of like men who do podcasts and who do shows, and they go to universities to deliver these lectures, and they are like out there for like trans folks bloods. And so one of the guys was saying कि, just then he said it in Urdu, I'm just going to verbatim quote him, that he said कि जिस दिन ट्रांसजेंडरिज्म की आड़ में कोई मर्द जो है तो वो उस वॉशरूम में घुसा जिसमें मेरी बहन जाती है, मैं टांग पे टांग रख के चीर दूंगा. Right. And that's like a
Wow.
kind of like very hyperbolic, very charged rhetoric that shouldn't be there. मतलब see यार, यहाँ पे खाने को नहीं है, पीने को नहीं है, ओढ़ने को नहीं है, बिछोने को नहीं है, सर मतलब तन पे कपड़ा नहीं है, पाँव में चप्पल नहीं है. That like trans folks have nothing. Like they are literally surviving on
Exactly.
they're putting their lives in harm's way, and they're surviving by whatever means. Or you're saying and that's not an issue we have, because, and I'm telling you this is the issue really, because these are talking points that are being used in the West. I mean, in the Western culture, people have gotten, like, the trans folks have all their rights. They can marry, they have the right to legal profession, they have all their rights. In Pakistan, people up until I think 2010s and even later on, folks didn't even have national identity cards. How do you go about how do you go about finding jobs if you don't have an identity card? and they don't have like, they have a right to legal profession, but nobody's giving them their right. And that right was even, I think, granted later on, after 2010s or somewhere. I think it was a Supreme Court judgment or something, if not mistaken. And so up until 2010, which is like after 60 years of our existence, they did not even have a right to legal profession. And so when you're like, you're giving them nothing, you're giving them, or you're offering them nothing. There's a social contract of the state with every citizen that I'll take away these freedoms, but I'll give you certain rights. And those rights have never been given to trans folks. And yet you're going out there and using this very charged rhetoric like this. "Okay, if you go to the washrooms, I will like kind of tear you apart limb by limb." And I mean, how come you're I mean, leaving aside everything, like you're leaving aside the argument that's why don't you address the argument that the trans folks have a right to legal profession, and why is not government ensuring that right to profession? And why, I mean, and when they are I think when they're subjected to violence, they cannot go to thanas or anywhere, because they know what happens to them when they do go to thanas, right? And so why is nobody like being sensitized to these issues, right? Because my I was there's this hojra in my locality, and there was they brought a few trans dancers to them once, and I was just passing by, and as I kind of peeked into where they were dancing, and the way the people were kind of treating them, or the way the people were abusing them literally while they were dancing. You only do that to folks who you think are beneath you. When you're so desensitized to people that you think they're not humans, or somehow they're like very beneath you, you only act to them that way when you're very desensitized. There's an entire issue of sensitizing people to lives of the or trans folks, and those are the conversations that we should be having. And instead you're going around and saying कि अगर वो कोई washroom में घुसा तो मैं उसको टांग पे टांग रख के चूं. I mean, that is like, I mean, and I don't know like how do like people even like come up with these things. Like an actual trans person died the other day because somebody shot them. Another person, they went to the hospitals and they were kind of, they wanted the blood for that person because they were, I think they needed blood somehow, and everybody in the hospital was laughing at them and mocking them and jeering them and ridiculing them, and they were crying that our sister is dying, please give us some blood or something, and people were mocking them. And when you're like so desensitized to someone's pain, like how come like there's like a lot like this plethora of issues that need to be addressed before we go on even and talk about, or there, if we give X mark to people will start doing same-sex marriages. Like that's a separate discussion, that's there's been
Mm.
on of that. These are the real problems nobody's talking about. And I think I like partly blame the activists for these, because they'll come around and they said, oh, the West came and they colonized us, and they gave us these gender binaries because previously there were no gender binaries, and the people who were trans, they were like, they could speak to the god, and they had like this venerated status in the society. And the Britishers came and they colonized us and they changed everything. Look at this. Let's say Saudi Arabia was never colonized, Iran was never colonized, a lot of Middle Eastern countries were never colonized. Why do we have this persecution of trans folks there when they were never colonized? I mean, look at India. The state of Hijra community that you call, or even the trans community that you say, is so much better than it is in Pakistan. I mean, so the entire argument about
Yeah,
decolonizing
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you
Pakistan.
100% because yeah, go on.
And so you see like in India, in India, like even not trans folks, like because trans folks have like it's like maybe some sort of acceptance in a culture. The queer folks, like other the gays or lesbian, they don't have any acceptance like in Pakistan. And if we were to run with this argument that the colonization happened, and before that we were really like accepting of people who were different sexually, or they had like a different gender, or they were two spirited, we were really accepted, we were really kind of good to those folks. If we are going to run with that argument, how like India and Pakistan went through colonization the same way. India, I think, later on decolonized themselves because they got dominion status later on than we did. And in India, I think in 2018, it was in the Bhutto Swami and Navtej verdict, the famous Supreme Court verdict of India, where the Indian Supreme Court, I think, not yet, I think, actually they, I think, took out a section 377 from their penal code, which is a section that kind of prohibits same-sex activity, right? And Indian Supreme Court basically said that if there is a right to like there's, I think, this legal term that says that if there is a right and it has been breached, then there should be a remedy for that right. And so they said that if someone has a right to privacy, the police cannot barge in and see that if they're engaging in same-sex activity, or whatever they're engaging in their whatever they're doing in the privacy of their home is they can do that because they have a right to privacy. And if they have the right to privacy, and if that right cannot be breached, then section 377 cannot be applied. Because if it is applied, then it would imply that the right to privacy has been breached. Because how come you're going to ensure that two lesbians are not engaging in same-sex activity? The only way to check that, or to ensure that they're not doing that, is to barge into their homes and to invade, or to to invalidate their right to privacy. And since you cannot invade someone's right to privacy, that is why section 377 cannot hold, which says that there cannot be same-sex activity. And so if the right to privacy has to hold, then section 377 has to hold. I'm going to the how that verdict was actually the legal reasoning behind
No,
that
but
verdict.
you're right. You're right, because see, these things can never be, found out if we don't have either activists in the lawyer field or queer people themselves. And this thing is, I think, this is the main thing that lacks in Pakistan. That
Hmm.
we really don't have any way of matlab, all the people who are either publicly activists, or all the people you, I don't know if you found out, but there's this there was this person in Nazmabad who was managing all these activities, all the the infrastructure developments and all that. And this person was ridiculed and jeered so much, even though they were doing such a great job at improving the areas around, in this small area of Karachi. And then they were moved around and they were treated really badly. But that's the main thing, right? That's the main thing. If you are basically in any way different, you're feared so much. And I feel like the sensitization and the desensitization that you're talking about has a lot of thing to do with how media portrays people who are queer or different in any way. They're always ridiculing them, and I just feel like that's something that needs to change if we want to bring a change in the way people see people who are
Of course.
different.
And I'm really glad that this gender interactive alliance that we have in Karachi. I think I'm not sure if it's a lot of trans folks in Karachi are associated one way or another with that organization, and they are doing a lot of good work, against HIV prevention and STIs prevention. And we are now
Hmm.
having more folks out there in the open, like there's Mehrab and all of that. Even though I don't agree with them, I just don't agree with this viewpoint that they're saying कि इसको मतलब कि I just don't agree with decolonization part. इसको decolonize कर दो, इसको paint कर दो, इसको polish. I mean, it's all this kind of shooting in the air. It's like throwing anything, everything at the wall and see what sticks. Because if you are going to run with the argument that we have to decolonize in Pakistan, then how come Indian Supreme Court can pass very landmark judgments like Pitoswamy and Navtej, where they give people where they struck down Section 377, which is still applicable in Pakistan, but Pakistan isn't able to do that. Because I think it's about time we kind of call the elephant in the room. I mean, I don't want to call the elephant in the room lest I attract a lynch mob, which is it has got something to do with the religion that we practice here. I mean, the kind of extremism that we have here. It's not got a lot of things to do with colonization or anything. And then that's my argument against them. And so there's it's just I think a lot of arguments that these folks throw at us are just stupid. One of the on podcasts I was watching, and they were saying, oh, it's like a slippery slope. If we let them have same-sex marriages, then they'll suddenly the pedophilia we'll also have to legalize pedophilia. And I was really, it's a stupid argument. I mean, you guys, the straights have been having sex for a while now. And the pedophilia has been also there for a while now. And so maybe the argument can be made that straight people, when straight people started having sex, pedophilia came into the fore of came in into existence because of the straight folks having sex. And I mean, why should it be only gay folks who when they have sex, that somehow that will lead to pedophilia, and not when straight people have sex that they may that cannot lead to pedophilia? I'm not sure how that these very stupid arguments stand. But they go around making these arguments. One of them was saying, क्या कहते हैं उसको? Okay, you have these feelings, but don't act on them. And so I was saying, yaar, how can you love someone and not want to run your fingers through their hair? How can you love someone and not want to taste their lips? And I'm sorry, pardon my language, maybe you can leave this out. But how can you love someone and not want to give or receive a blowjob, or lick their private parts? I'm really sorry. I mean, as Haris would agree. फराज says ना, I mean, who's going to argue with फराज कि जरा सी हवस तो गर्दन पे लाजिम है फराज, वो इश्क क्या है जो दामन को पाक चाहता है, ठीक है ना? I mean, तो कौन सा इश्क दामन को पाक चाहता है यार? So I mean, you can argue with me, but you cannot argue with Faraz. With a poet like Faraz, like who
Definitely.
literally Muhasira. I mean,
Yeah.
all of these right wingers combined cannot even come up with one line of Muhasira. So I mean, yeah, अजीब किस्म के arguments they guys peddle, and that's it. But another thing that I like disagree, and I think we should like थोड़ा सा इसमें बात कर लेते हैं, then we can go on to the other topics. Is that like there's also this way, there's a few activists who are saying that we are not going to put labels, that we do not want labels, that why should I put a label on myself, or why? And I think that is like really. I disagree with that, because when you have a label on something, you have a word for them, and when you have a word for something, you can like go into the depth of that thing, that phenomenon. You can build nuance around that thing. You can build edge cases around that thing. If I were to say like there's a famous queer activist, her name is Marsha P. Johnson. Marab likes to quote her a lot of us do, and she once she like there was this riot in US in 1969 called the Stonewall riots. So there, I think this quote is attributed to her, that she said, "Darling, I want my gay rights and I want them now." Right? And if I cannot put a name on myself, if I cannot label myself, then what am I going to say? Am I going to say, "Darling, I want my rights that cannot be labeled"? I mean, if you cannot see your rights, how are you going to talk about them, right? Like, and
That
this is
makes
happening
sense.
in Pakistan. Like a lot of these, like I'm sorry, like I'm using the elite, this word that they're elitist, but it is elitist if you're going to think that if I do not want to label stuff because it's a Western concept to put labels on everything. I mean, how can you? I mean, if like. I mean, like if statistics are important, like we can only talk about things in as abstract for a while. We can only talk about things like we can only make concepts in thin air for a while. At the end of the day, we are all statistics. You know, so if I am going to say that 10% of the population anywhere in the world, like wherever population pool I think like sample a population, and you will find that 10% of that population will be queer. And if I don't have a word, what will I say? The 10% of the population will be people who cannot put label on themselves. Like, how are you going to talk about something that you can put a label
True.
on? Right?
Apart from just statistics, I mean, from a legal point of view, it's also important to, if you don't have a label, if you don't have a name,
What are you?
how can you get a mention in, like any legal official, uh,
Huh?
yeah,
All like a fight of semantics. I mean, like in Harry Potter, they said that he who must not be named, right? And so like when when Dumbledore goes and says, he never says who he cannot be named. He never says Lord Voldemort, because Voldemort invites fear. He says Tom, and like by
yeah,
the very fact that he Tom, he kind of takes away that power that Voldemort has. And so words have immense power, and if you kind of like, if you're not going to take the names, if you're not going to put labels on anything, I'm not sure how you're going to fight for that thing. And that's another thing that's happening in the, like, in the space, in the queer space. And I just wanted to like call that out. So yeah.
hmm, yeah, yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think we talked about like so many factors, including government and the legal and also the activism and whatnot. But I just have one question, and I want to ask who is the most important support, like the kind of support that can actually make difference. I'm talking about in Pakistani society. Is it parents? Is it the state? Is it the queer community in Pakistan? Who is it? What do you think?
See, I think it has got to be the queer community. Like the state has been around for a while. It hasn't done anything in the 70 years. It passed a law, a very good law, called the Transgender Persons Act. I've forgotten the full name of the act, but it was passed in 2018. I think you guys would know about something like it's been talked about for a while now in the media and in the popular culture. That law gave us the right to self-perceived identity. That right has been taken away now when the act got challenged in the Sharia court. It's still being like the case is still being discussed not being discussed. The case is still like, I think hasn't been listed in Supreme Court, but it's there. So that is, I think, one kind of winning, or one victory that we had in all these years, the right to self-perceived identity. And that has been taken away as long as the right wingers got a whiff of it. They didn't. I don't think like it was Most people knew it. Even if they knew it, they were like, it got passed in 2018 and got struck down in 2023, just 5 years after. So they were like, as soon as it was passed, they were like, after, like they were turning to the courts to get this part out of the act, that you cannot have a self-perceived identity. So that's the only victory that we had in all these years. And that came about not because, not because of like the parents who was like who kind of, I don't think like there was any the law that was passed or anybody, the petitioners who were contesting the other side in the Sharia court, that even like one parent, like all of them who were like kind of defending the petition in the Sharia court, or all of the people who got past the laws were all activists. It was nobody from like kind of the parents of a trans person, or the loved one of a trans person who has petitioned or who has made themselves a subject in the case because they want to protect their kids' right, or they want to protect their loved ones' right. So I think it has to come from the community themselves. Uh, and because I think it like even like when you look at the kind of work that the queer community has done in Pakistan, like let's say like look at the a few NGOs or the alliances that we have made. All of those have been made possible because the activists themselves took the charge of situation, and they then partnered with the UN in some cases, or in the some other NGOs in some cases. The government hasn't really been helpful, to be honest. Uh, and so I think like the government is not even helping the straight folks. So I mean, how can a gender and persecuted minority, like they're not going to come into the persecuted minority? But I think we have to like kind of our own act together, at some point, because uh, when I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said, okay, like we might be like, if we engage in enough self respectability politics, and if we kind of, do this and that, and maybe we'll get something like self-perceived identity. But what about the rest of the fight? Like we all need liberation. It's not just like the T part of the LGBTQ that needs liberation. Also, there are more, and I'm sorry, like I would like to concede that the trans community has done more activism and has given more blood, and has been persecuted more than any other part of the LGBTQ. But it's also that it's a fight for the T part. It's also for the fight for the rest of the LGBT, all these alphabets, right? And so I was telling him, at some point, all of us who are the L and G and B also have to come to the fore, and also have to enter the arena and to do it. Because मैंने उनसे कहा ना कि वो जो मतलब the activists that are out there, I think they are doing a few things wrong. तो मैंने उनसे कहा कि ना खंजर उठेगा ना तलवार उनसे, वो बाजू मेरे आजमाए हुए हैं, तो हमें खुद कुछ करना होगा, ठीक है? I was telling
Wow.
him that the LGB part has to come to it has to do something now.
This is one other question. Talking about support, support from people around you, support from the community, especially in your teen years. The time when you are forming your identity. You're kind of finding yourself and who you are. Where do you belong? In those years, how much important is parent support, and also how much of a difference can it make, like in the future, how um, uh, like does it develop you in a certain way, the way they respond to this?
You see, Harris, like I think like I have this theory, right? Like we all like question, or we all kind of criticize the values that are our antecedents, or the values of our parents or our ancestors, right? So like let's say that a lot of us, like let's talk about like the anti-Semitism that's very like common in Pakistan. So like a lot of my elders I know for a fact are anti-Semites. God knows why they are, but they are just kind of, if you argue with them, they'll kind of partake in whataboutery and hyperbolic statements, but they'll never kind of tell you why they are anti-Semites. But they are just the way they are. And now the younger lot is like it doesn't make sense to them, so they are like less, more less receptive to their anti-Semitism. So I think the way you're saying, parent support and all of that, I think that is very missing in Pakistan, because our parents are like our generation wasn't really exposed to. With my parents, I think my mother was born in 60s and my father was born in 60s. I'm not sure about the millennial parents. I'm not sure about the parents of Gen X, like people born in 80s, and so I'm not sure about those folks. but my folks are pretty conservative. So I think as we kind of challenge all these values that our antecedents grown up with, and as millennial parents challenge the values that they were kind of their parents imbibed in them when they were growing up, I think things will change then. So while the support is important, I think the support is not really there. It I I'm not like it's like I'm just giving you guess estimate, but I think if for every for every 1 lakh families, there might be one family that supports their queer kids in Pakistan, and it's just like I've made this up, but I think it's true. Like because I have a lot of queer friends, and my goodness, not one of them have parents who are supportive. So I think that's a state
Hmm.
of affairs. So I think it will be like a gradual process. It will be a slow evolution, but I think with time it will come because as I say that there are pressures, the pressures from environment. Like there's no more historically we had this pressure that you have to advance your progeny, you have to have kids. We don't have those kind of pressures anymore in the 21st century. So I think as these these values that we grew up with, they'll kind of recede and give way to these new things, the culture that will be more supportive.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's true, and uh, I think we all have a role to play
Yeah,
um, in making sure. Yeah. Apart from these, I have one other question I wanted to ask you.
sure.
Like we are talking about, mostly we're talking about, feeling different than people around you, the
Mhm.
society you live in, how, society expect you to be. Um, you also mentioned uh, that you are not, like not neurotypical. So, like,
Mhm.
also that's also something you are experiencing that make you unique in a way. So, like, what are other things like these you know about yourself? That makes you different, makes you feel different.
I'm not like putting labels on myself right now because for the fear that if someone I know were to listen to this conversation, it will not like end up well for me. But I'm not like only like my gender identity is also not like cisgender. Like I'm not a cisgendered person, right? So I mean so like I like experimenting with fashion. I like with experimenting. I like to cross dress sometimes. And so that's also like something that's kind of different. And with also that, I think like but on neurotypical thing lines it would be that I think I I can either hyper focus on something or or I can like kind of like if I have to be in something if I have to be like involved in something I'll go all the way but like I cannot just kind of give a half-assed effort into anything. I don't know if this like it's neurotypical of me to do that, but it's just if I'm focused on something, I'm 100% focused. I cannot be like distracted. But if I'm like in a state of mind where I'm distracted, then I'll get distracted by by like by very minor inconvenience. Like if somebody
Oh
is
my
kind of
God, Talha, I can completely relate. So, just like trying to give you like a, like a full disclosure type of moment. When you mentioned ADHD, I had also been thinking about like, jumping in the conversation saying, hey, we too, because, I've been wondering something about myself. And this is something I also can 100% relate with. When I'm hyper focused, when I'm like, when I really like something and it's really stimulating me, I will,
Mhm.
spend my entire like even if if I skip sleep, I will be spending my entire existence devoted to this one thing. And
Yep.
if I'm not interested, I just won't be interested at all. Like I just would be distracted by the tiniest thing. I'll be like, oh, ye kar leti hu instead of this.
Yeah,
So
I
Exactly.
yeah,
think
you can.
one thing
Some,
about Reja is that she would
Mhm.
even forget to eat, like the whole day. And at the end of the day, if you ask her, "Oh, did you eat?" Or like, "Oh, I was so focused, I didn't even feel hungry."
Yeah, but for me, like it's when I'm like I get distracted by the smallest thing possible. Like if I'm doing on something, and even if it's important, and if someone were to as so much as even enter the room, I will say, "Oh, now I have to take like a half hour break because I just got distracted." But like the smallest possible thing that can happen, and that would just distract me for an hour or two, and that's how it is. and like I like have to constantly stimulate myself. Like, so if I'm sitting on my chair, and if I'm like, let's say, because the other day I was kind of trying to like teach this, it was a question of integration to my to a young friend of mine, and I was doing this question for him. Like, he sent me, and he told me to, like, solve this and send it to me, and I just couldn't get focused on it. And like, it took me, like, it was a short question. It took me, I think, close to 3 hours to solve that question. I did not solve it from ChatGPT or anywhere. I knew the answer, but it was not just kind of exciting enough. And so I would like write one word or write just like one expression, and then I would get up and go out and do something else, and then I would come back. That's how it is with me. Like, sometimes it's really, really a struggle to like, get focused on
Mm.
something.
So yeah, that's you and Reja. Uh,
And we have to
another thing, yeah.
Wow,
So
what a bragger! I swear to God.
yeah,
uh,
so
not like, I think Haris is someone, I think, who can like who's normal. I think, like,
Yeah, he can really sit down and focus on no matter how boring the thing is. I swear, it's like the most
yeah, I just
annoying
forced
thing to
myself
do.
into it.
first, chalo. At least that's good.
So yeah,
Good for
Yeah.
you.
so yeah, we talked about so many things, na? And there's one important question I want to ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, how, like, all these experiences you had, and the experiences we discussed today mostly were negative experiences. So how do you cope with it? Like, I'm talking about, coping with them, and throughout, from like your teens to now, you have grown so much. Like, I've known you since so long. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, getting that self acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
so what kind of strategies, I'm using strategies word, but what kind of strategies you can use, you did use, to for self acceptance, and how did you build a support network around you?
Sure. I think it would also, like, the answer will not just be like about me. It will also be like an advice to young players, because most of them come to me for an advice, and it feels good to like feel like a community elder. But it's just that, one thing that I tell them mostly is that do not come out unless until you're independent, because you never know how your family is going to act. You never know, like, how like you don't want to like blindly trust them. You have no idea how people can be terrible, even if they are, like, blood relatives. So do not come out unless until you're independent, right? And so I'm also going to talk about the strategy a little, but I just like wanted to see this, because this is something that I really like, kind of something that I learned. Uh, so dusra, and the second thing was that please do not fall in love with a straight man or straight woman, because it's not going to end well for you. I think it's not going to end up well for you. Like, there's no way in hell that that straight person is ever going to love you. Like, it's going to end terribly for you. It has, like, I've made a lot of terrible decisions career wise, academically, because of this thing. I'm not going to like go like into details or divulge further, but I have like done a lot of harm for my like I've done a lot of harm to myself and my career, as due to that. So please don't do that. Like, that's one thing. Like, don't do like the most like, God forbid, like, don't do like the most terrible thing that you can do to yourself. Like, be like a little wise if you can. So for me, it was I think I was, you see, I've always been contrarian in some sense. Like, I have always never like been someone who would, if you tell them something, they would just accept it as face value. I would go and do my research. I'm that kind of person. So like, it was always easy for me to question the established norms, because I was like, I always thought differently. Like, not like I thought differently. Not like I was like, oh my god, like I'm this person who always was this way. It's just that it's something that came naturally to me. It's something that I do. I don't even if you give me anything, I won't trust you. I will go and do my research before I like trust you in anything. That's just me. So it was just I felt this way, and I thought, ki, uh, okay, the scripture says this about me, but back then I was already losing interest in faith. So for me, like, for a lot of, I think, young folks, it's difficult to accept themselves, because because of the religion, because religion says that, oh, you will burn in hell or wherever. So one thing is that they it's hard to accept, because a religion, And the second thing, it's hard to accept because your family, because that there's stigma attached to it, and maybe it, it will kind of have consequences for you. And I frankly, I haven't experienced any consequences as of now, because I haven't been out to anybody except my close friends. So consequences, so barring the consequences part, self acceptance I think was easy, because as I told you that I'm like, I think liberally. So I am okay with people who are different. And if I myself was different, then that was also okay too. And that's not to say that I haven't changed. I haven't tried to change myself. It's not to that I have not worked like all like I think there have been days and months where I grew up and I said I will walk this way. I will talk like this. I will make my voice like this, and I will talk like this. I won't use hand gestures, and I will pray to God, to change me or whatever. But that's it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for any of us. And as Pete Buttigieg famously said, okay, if you're if you have this, your quarrel is not with me. Your quarrel is with my creator. Okay. So, even if for the folks who believe in God, na, if someone is coming to you that you're living a sinful existence, so you can tell them that the quarrel is that their quarrel is not with you, their quarrel is with the creator, because they created you a certain way. But I'm not religious, so the creator is not like something that comes into play in my case. But I would say that I am I'm a rational. It just kind of gives off the vibe that I'm like a someone who's very full of themselves and is praising themselves. It's just not. It's just that I am. I was saying I'm like liberal in the sense that
Hmm.
I was, I think 9 or 10 when I really liked the concept of feminism, even though everyone around, I have a extremely ultra conservative religious family, and I've always been this way. I've always I have always not liked forcing women to have do parda or whatever. So I have been contrarian in that sense, and if I felt myself that I was there was something different about me, it was easy for me to accept myself. I don't know why or where I got this strength, because I've seen friends and acquaintances struggle with this thing so much, and I did not struggle with self acceptance at least. So that's one thing.
Yeah,
What?
I would just like to add that it's really good that matlab, first of all, you yourself also called yourself like an elder, at least like someone who can actually uh, give advice to all the people who are maybe going through the same motions that you did at some point.
Mhm.
And it's nice to hear that like you can basically tell them from all of that, okay, okay, this worked for me and this did not. And at the end of the day, I do realize, okay, yeah, a lot of this things that that I feel like if you were more of a religious person, to start with, and at this point as well, it might have been more difficult for you to let go of the stigma that that's something that's ingrained in us since the beginning. Oh, okay, yaar, matlab, like all of
Yeah,
the stuff that we've always heard. Huh?
exactly.
Go ahead.
Somewhere
I
that
think.
religion something as deeply held as religion is usually for a lot of people, it becomes a part of identity. You see, so it becomes really I was talking to somebody and I was asking them, why are people become so violent and charged when when something like blasphemy happens, and he said that when you do something like that, they feel like you have personally disrespected them, because people who are religious, they kind of internalize that religion as a part of their identity. So when you say something that's opposed to them, that you that feel like you're attacking them personally. And so when people who are really religious and the religion becomes a part of their identity, then there's the conflict is so huge, that there's a part of their identity that is square and the part of identity that is very religious. So it's like a tug of war between these two parts, and you never know which
I
part to do.
Yeah, I think the thing with the religion is that it messes up with people's mind. Instead of regulating the human nature, it's literally suppressing human
Of course.
nature. Exactly. So
I think
yeah.
it something falls to people to I think when I was when I was a young adult, I thought people would grow out of, because I myself had grown out of religion by that point. So I thought most people will how come people are not able to grow out of religion when they become adults? How does this thing still make sense to them? And I still haven't figured that out. But it's just, I think that Christianity is just as let's say, less receptive to homosexuality or queerness. It's even, I think, more, let's say, on the other end of the spectrum that's not accepting these things. It's, I think, even more, it goes further than Islam. But still, like, the Christian nations have kind of learned through the history that they shouldn't kind of, after the the 30 years war and 100 years of war, and after all these Protestant Reformation and all those wars, they realize that the religion, while it's important, shouldn't be there as a guiding force when it comes to governance and when it comes to regulating the society. So I think that is something that we need to do, because like secularism. I think the more the society will become secular, the more these things, that because of course, like, when you say it is in your preamble of the constitution that the state will ensure that the Muslims are able to live their lives according to the injunctions of Islam, then when the state's responsibility is to ensure that people live their life according to Islam, then it's difficult to struck down sections like 377, which says that sex, same sex is unnatural and against human nature, and it's punishable for so and so years. It's difficult to struck down that laws because you have
Hmm.
said it in your bill that this is going to be a state which is going to implement Islam. And so I think a lot of decolonization that people talk about, what the word that they should be saying is that we should be going towards secularism instead of, because decolonization will happen gradually. Because as I said earlier, India and we got, independence on the same day, and they got it, they got rid of dominion status even later on than we did. But still, they have been able to pass really important judgments and, really secular laws, because at the end of the day, their preamble says that India is going to be a socialistic, secular republic, and our preamble says that we are going to be an Islamic republic. So
You're
it's I
right.
stumbling block too, because a lot of folks that I have to spoken to, and they, like, I can argue against them whenever they bring an argument against, like, queerness or anything, that it's not natural or anything. I have very solid arguments against that. But when they say, oh, but the state is Islamic, and since the state is Islamic, anything that is against the Islam cannot be allowed in the state. And that's when I tell them, oh, now you have, like, of course you have won the argument now, because I cannot argue against something that's there in the laws. If you're coming to this discussion to, like, this discussion, and you're basing your arguments on religion, you're using a religious sense, then I cannot win the argument from you, because religion is a matter of submission. It's like, like a question of faith and submission. It's not like a sphere where you're allowed to question something. Either you submit to it or you don't submit to it. And since I don't submit to it, I'm able to do whatever I want to do. Your religion forbids you to doing stuff from doing stuff. It doesn't forbid me. So, but if you
Hmm.
like the country, a religious country, then the country is, like, well within its bound to stop anything that's un-Islamic.
Yeah. I think you're right. Even in the constitution, there isn't enough flexibility.
Hmm.
So to get something done, you have to, as we talked about
Yeah,
earlier,
of course.
activists like Meera is doing. Another thing, now that you're talking about Meetup, I think the first time I heard about Meetup was because of some viral Facebook or Instagram posts of Murat March. So, talking about Murat March, what kind of role is Murat March playing in, making more space for queer people, or like the LGBTQ in
One
Pakistan?
Sure. So I think one thing that they have done is that we are having this conversation because somebody had an idea that, let's take out a march in Karachi, and that, because I think this is, and someone was brave enough, like Marab, to go out there on the TV and say things that needed to be said. Even I may not agree with how they worded, like, how they said it, or what they said, or how they worded it. But at least we are having this conversation because someone was brave enough to go out there and say something, because up until now we weren't even having any of these conversations. I think one thing that Murat March have done, or these activists have done, is that they have created a space where at least we are talking about it. Because, all of, like, politics is an act of theater. All politics is an act of performance, is a drama. And so, like, the more you kind of, like, so a march is also an act of theater. But since you go out and do a march, Since you go out and do a parade or a walk, people are going to talk about it. It's going to be on the TV. And so this is how the people are going to get exposed to these concepts. And the more they get exposed to these things, I think exposition to a new concept is always good, because the more you like, I think there's like a psychological thing, no? It's a psychological concept even. Okay, the more like it's easy to kind of it's easy to like acquiesce. The word is acquiescence yourself with something when you're more exposed to it, or when you're like kind of when you see it every day in your life, or when you like know folks who talk about it, when you know folks who are actually experiencing that thing. So I think it's at least done this thing, is that it's created the space where we are having these conversations. So we are going having this conversation in our National Assembly. We are having these conversation in our courts in the form of where it's being contested, a few sections of the bill. We are having this conversation on this podcast. We are having like even folks are having this conversation in the on the university campuses, right? So I think the first step is
Hmm.
always the conversation, and then like I mean it's always a gradual process. Sometimes you have a protest, sometimes you have a conversation, and sometimes one thing or another. But I think one thing is always constant, and it's that you never, like nobody in history, I think it's a very famous quote by Asata Shakur, that nobody in history has ever gotten their rights by appealing to the moral sense of people oppressing them. So I think we are not going to get our
Hmm.
rights by uh, playing respectability politics, or by kind of creating these kind of somehow uh, things that like by going through all these hoops to kind of say that we are normal or we are part of this culture. That's not going to work. At some point we have to like throw bricks, as they say.
Exactly, you're absolutely right. I want to ask one more question, and
Mhm.
I guess before I ask you that question, there's something else. It's good if you want to talk about this. If you want to give some more, piece of advice to uh,
Okay.
the younger people, if you have something.
Sure. So for one, I think, you see, like, as I said, there are like, there can be like folks who are religious now. So I think that I think like one thing that like a lot of folks came back to me and say, it's like this is haram, it's that, it's this and that, and so this advice that you like it's how God made you, like as Lady Gaga says that you were born this way. It doesn't work for a lot of folks. And so I think one thing I told them was to, you'll figure out this later. Just like go with the current track for now. Don't think something is wrong with you, but also like if you want to stay religious, go out and pray and whatever it is that you're doing, don't like kind of stop praying or whatever, because then you will feel guilty and you will feel more guilty and you will think that this part of like this thing about you is kind of keeping you or creating like a distance between you and God, or between you and your religion. So you'll figure out this question as you like go about your life. So keep like your faith and keep your this part of your self like intact. Like live both parts of your
Ah,
life. And so like precisely,
exactly.
and like you're in no hurry. You'll figure out life along the way. So it's just kind of go with the current for now. And this, I think, second thing would be is that please like don't do this. Like I think it's just it's also it's personal, because like the people I have known who have kind of this like this person is a very good friend, was a very good friend, and like they were queer, and like one day I accidentally like I just kind of asked him, if Pakistan was suddenly to accept queer folks, what will you do? And he said he'll protest against it. And I was so shocked. I was like shell shocked. Like I was really, it
What
was really like
what did he
astounding.
say? I couldn't hear you. Can you please say that again?
He said that I'll go out and protest against it. So like if
Hmm.
Pakistan were to legalize, queer folks, like legal by legal, I mean we are already legal, we are living here, and it's not that we are illegal. Like Pakistan were to legalize same-sex marriages, or same-sex activity. So he said he'll go out and protest against it. And he was someone who squared themselves, like who had talked to me about this guy that they loved previously. So I was shocked really, and I said, like how much like how come you like are able to hate yourself so like I didn't say that exactly. I just kind of kept quiet to myself, and I was like really like kind of thinking about ruminating it as I was kind of coming back to my hostel after having met him. So I was just like ruminating over it, that like how can this happen to someone? Like how do are you able to hate a part of yourself so much? And
I yeah.
it's just that I would like want to say that, please don't like do not do not just go out and indulge in self-loathing. Do not hate a part of yourself, because there's nothing. I don't like. There's no wise way to say there is nothing wrong with you. I think like everybody who's triple digit IQ will be able to figure out that there's nothing wrong with them, and it's something that's just a part of their like it's just part of their psyche. It's part of their body or their mind or whatever, wherever they want to put it, but they'll know it. And I think the first step when you know it is to accept it. Don't like fight with it. Don't kind of try to even try to rationalize it that might work, but don't fight with it. Just let it stay there. It's going to stay there up until you are on your deathbed. So there is no point in fighting it. And so if you don't fight it, and if you just let it stay, slowly and gradually you'll make peace with it. So that's like it. Just kind of go with the current.
Mm.
Because
Yeah,
a
I
lot of
think
fighting with it and who start like kind of over analyzing themselves end up in a place where they kind of start hating that part of themselves. Yeah.
exactly. And also, I guess this shows the amount of uh, influence religion has on these things. One other thing I wanted to ask you, and I want to ask you this because you're probably the only person I would be, on this podcast I would be able to ask this. And the
Mhm.
question is, can you please talk a little about the emotional toll of Qaid-e-Azam hostel that we were in?
Oh my God. Emotional toll. I think it was like hell on earth. Like Pakistan itself is hell on earth, but it was like I think as they say na कि like दोजख के भी 8-10 दर्जे हैं और सबसे like जो बुरा दर्जा था, that was probably Qajar hostel, right? So it's just, I mean, you would just kind of like have like 12 to 10 to 12 kids, not kids, like uh, teens or young adults in a room, and you kind of monitor them. It was like a, as they say कि वो जो communist republics होती है ना, कि they kind of send you to labor camps. It was like sort of a labor camp where you have to toil and work hard for at least, I think we used to close to 18 hours of your day, and then you will get some 5 to 6 hours of sleep. And so it really, I think we were like kind of living our lives in bonded slavery, is what it was. And also like the amount of praying and the religion that we had to religious activity, not the religious activities, like the prayers used to I think run into at least an half an hour, if not more, right? Like
Yeah, exactly. Maybe
yeah.
more.
I've heard this from like second-hand experiences. Like, I've heard it from Haris only that you guys used to be woken up at like this early hour, like, like late, like it's not even light at that time, and like you're woken up and you're like basically forced to line up for the restrooms to like
Yep.
take a shower, do your wuzu, and join everyone in
Exactly.
the masjid and everything. And it just seemed so orchestrated, like like yeah, this you have to do this at this time and this at this time, and then the only time you have to yourself is like between this asr and maghrib period, where you can just go out and maybe do something for yourself only. And the entire rest of the time you're completely monitored. And I've just heard it only, but I would love to hear about this.
Yeah, so as you
Uh,
were saying, it was orchestrated. It wasn't orchestrated. It was forced. It was forced, and it was forced on the pain of whiplashes. Like if you don't get up early to like to go and make your wuzu or whatever, they would literally beat you then and there while you're sleeping. Happened to me. Like because I was lazy and I wouldn't get up, and they would bring the stick and beat me up so that I would get up and go hurry and make wuzu. So like that is how it was, and so it was like I'm saying hell on earth.
okay. I guess there's one other thing. Like in the same experience, like being a liberal or being a secular person and um, living in such an environment where you are forced, like literally forced to pray and all these things. What's the effect of that on you?
Yeah, so it's not just like Kajadam hostel Harris. Like as I said, my family is also like ultra conservative, religious folks. So like the constant, I think there is like like the only conflict that I have with my folks is that because I don't pray, and that's like the only bone of contention that we have between. Otherwise, like we have a really good, a really like good relationship with them. But this issue that we have, that I don't pray at all, and so it's not that it takes a toll. Like at some point, you realize that if it's so important for them, I'll maybe fake it. I'll maybe just tell them that, oh, I prayed, and if they come to the room, I'll just kind of displace the janamas from one place to another and tell them that, oh, देखो janamas वहाँ पड़ी थी, वहाँ पड़ी, मैंने पढ़ ली नमाज ना. And like you learn these tricks and you kind of pick them. But and it like that isn't the difficult part. The difficult part is when it's like the mismatch, or it's like the conflict in between your minds. It's like when you think so differently from them. That is the conflict. And the conflict, and that might be even okay, but I think when you're when like if I were an atheist and if I were straight, my life would be still very okay. But now that I'm an atheist and I'm also queer, I think like I have to have like a very major kind of battle or fight in my life where I have to kind of form, if not come out, then at least like this thing that is going to come out, because eventually like I'll be forced into a straight marriage or something like that. And that is like what scares me, that there's like that conflict that I have to have. Uh, because like our folks, they like when people grow up with something, like they have a different worldview now. Like you cannot change them when they're 60. Like you cannot go out and tell them that like this institution of marriage may not work for everybody. Like it's not a novel concept for them. A novel would be like not the right word. It's like a very radical is not even the right word. It's like a bloody revolution for them to like even kind of make sense of something like that. Okay, oh, like people don't get married, or oh, people are gay. Like that's not something that occurs to them. One thing that really encapsulates Pakistani society, Haris, is like hypocrisy. Like you would see these old uncles who would be like frothing at the gash, if they like if you talk to them about something even mildly liberal, and then these would be the same uncle who would be, stalking Filipino women on the internet and sending them messages like, "Oh, nice boobs" and stuff. You know? Like it's just so like
Yeah, yeah, no values whatsoever, I swear.
yeah, like this hypocrisy. My goodness, like that is like one word that I think unites us all. They would be like literally frothing at, like they would be really so angry at anything that's even like mildly liberal or something, and then they would go out and do something that you would be like, really, ye kya hai? Dekho zara inko. Like I'm
Mhm.
telling you this from personal experience, because I know one of these uncles who is like really religious but then does this stuff. But I don't know how
Yeah.
they like
Yeah, we
able to
all have
even.
seen such people, and
So,
you encounter
100%.
these people like every other day on Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, Talha, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for being so brave. And it was so nice talking to you about these things. I know we haven't talked in like a while now, and I would say that I've known you for so long now, and I'm just very proud of you that you came and shared your story, and also how much you have grown and how much you have learned, and the kind of person you have become, or even the kind of person you will become in the future. I am proud of all of these. So thank you so much for sharing all these experiences with us today.
Sure. So like thank you so much for like having me. It was like my first time having this conversation. So I don't know, I have like these mixed up thoughts in my head. I hope that like most of what I've said, I hope that it makes sense to your audience. If it didn't make sense, I can come
Yes,
another
yes.
time.
Yeah, you were very articulate, and you covered a lot of things that we really wanted to, speak about, and all of those things are super important. They need to be sure, otherwise, like we will keep living in a stigmatized society where people who are different in any way will be scared to, come out and say that they are different,
Of
which
course, and
is a very dangerous thing.
course, and it's like human lives that we are talking about. Like it's like people really torture themselves and torment themselves thinking about these, and it's like important. Like of course, like they're saying that famously, I think it was James Baldwin who said that the single most important power of literature is that you go through something and then you read about that another person maybe 50 years ago went through similar thing in their life, and you like feel a sort of connection or solidarity with them. And that's like the important power of literature, or like arts or whatever, that it like kind of makes things visible, people who have been hitherto invisible. And so that is, I think, I wanted to do this also because I wanted to like normalize this, if there's maybe some kid out there would listen to this and they would realize that, oh, whatever I'm going through, maybe this person who's talking has also been through all of that, and he turned out to, at least 50% okay. So I'll also be okay, right? So I think that's important, and that's why I also wanted to have this conversation. I also wanted to like, there was the part of like the conversation, I talked about a few things that I really wanted to talk about. So yeah, like it was really really nice, like having, like, you both are really good listeners. So thank you, like, for putting up with me for all of this while. It was brilliant, and I hope that the life tapestry, like,
Yeah,
turns out this.
yeah. We really want it to be like a safe space and everything. I would like to wrap it up. Thank you, Talha, and thank you, Haris, also. Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
take
Goodbye.
care.
Okay, thank you guys for joining on today and being a part of this insightful conversation that we had. I hope it was as insightful for you guys as it was for me. And yeah, just tune in for the next episode where we talk about something else that's as raw as the conversation we had today.